Hey everybody, and welcome to week 2 of Qualitative Research Methods. This week we're going to be talking a little bit more about what is qualitative research, what separates it and makes it different from quantitative research. Your assignments will be to that effect. I'm going to talk here in a minute a little bit about the approaches to qualitative research and kind of give you some background on the history and the philosophical perspectives of it. But I also want you to read chapter 2 in your text. So that way you get to know a little bit more about the underpinnings and how it came about and what we can do with qualitative research, how it can be applied, whether that's just for a purely scholarly approach or for more practical purposes. And then the next thing I want you to do, and this is your assignment for this week, by Sunday, January 27th at midnight, go back to the discussion board, and I want you to do the second discussion board post that we have there dealing with the interpretive frameworks. I want you to pick 3 of those and discuss those a little bit more in depth. Okay? Hopefully by this point you've had a chance to go through Blackboard and get yourself more familiar with it. You've gone through the syllabus and understand what the expectations are for you and what you can expect from me. You see this course schedule and how we're going to follow through and build on one topic to the next throughout this semester. And hopefully you've all gone through the discussion board, the discussion board, and introduced yourself to the class. I've gone through all those. I've commented on everybody's that I've seen. I'm really enjoying getting to know you and seeing about your backgrounds and what your future holds in terms of what dreams you have, what goals you have, what it is you want to do with your career, and how you're hoping that this qualitative research methods class will help you achieve that. So I've been enjoying that and just really looking forward to getting to know you all more throughout this semester. Now let's dig in a little bit to the approaches to qualitative research. And when we talk about the approaches to qualitative research, one of the first things I want you to recognize is the different approaches that we may take. There's a multitude of approaches to qualitative research, or what we might call qualitative inquiry. They're divided up by their theoretical traditions, but they include phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, narrative analysis, and case studies. And each of those we'll be discussing a little more in depth throughout the semester. We'll take one class period actually and deal with each one of those approaches. But the primary questions that we're seeking to ask and determine to learn about are why and how. So first of all, the history of qualitative research methods, it can be traced back to anthropology and sociology, and then we also use it in applied fields such as journalism, education, social work, medicine, and law. Places where we're trying to find out why a particular culture functions in a way it does, or why a profession may work the way it does and make the decisions it does, and what impact that might have on those around it. So you might think about from a journalism perspective, for example, since that's my background, why editors choose to run one type of story over another, or why they consistently make the decisions they do in terms of what stories to cover and which ones not to cover, which photographs to run and which ones not to run, which stories to use with video and which ones are just readers, those types of things. In the 60s and 70s, prior to this, we were very much interested in the empirical studies that come with quantitative research. But in the 60s and 70s, qualitative research and the different approaches to qualitative research became a methodology in its own right because we wanted to know a little bit more of the why. We were getting to know a lot of the what was happening, but we wanted to dig deeper and find out why it was happening, in part so we could correct errors and in part so that we could continue doing things that worked well. Some of the characteristics of qualitative research, it may be very basic. We're interested. We want to know why something is the way it is, and we're not really planning to do anything with it. We're just trying to figure out why. Or it can be applied, and that's where we want to improve the quality of practice. Focus is on meaning and understanding. We want to know what is happening. We want to know what elements of the culture or of the society lead it to perform in this way, what impact that might have, and those types of things. The researcher is the primary instrument here in qualitative research, as you, the researcher, are going to be the one asking the questions and doing the interviews. You're going to be the one observing what is happening. You're going to be the one determining which data to mine, which articles to look at, versus in the quantitative approach, you're looking more at a survey. Even in a content analysis where you have a code book, that can be looked at as a survey, but you're trying to crunch numbers in that quantitative approach. It's also a very inductive approach. It's used to build concepts or fill in the gaps in the theory. It's rich in description. It's a constant comparative method, meaning we're constantly comparing one set of data to another. We're constantly gathering new information. We want to compare it to what we already have. and it usually uses very small, non-random samples. We're very specific. You think about a case study, for example. A case study, you're looking at one particular case at one particular time. So I got my degree in public relations, and one of the cases we would look at was the Tylenol cyanide scare back in the late 80s, early 90s. And we wanted to see how did the PR staff for Tylenol, or Johnson & Johnson really, how did they handle that particular case? Wouldn't do us any good to look at the creation of Tylenol. Wouldn't do us any good to look at a drug scare using some other form of drug. We wanted that specific case at that specific time, which meant we're using a very small, non-random sample. We're pinpointing exactly what it is we want to look at, exactly when we want to look at it. One thing to keep in mind with qualitative research, and this is true of any kind of research, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, whether you're doing a case study or an ethnographic study, whether you're doing a survey or an experiment, the study is only as good as its design, and that means you have to have the right population. You need to have well-developed questions that you're asking. It needs to be reliable and valid. You need to be generalizable. You need to be ethical. All of those things are hallmarks of good research, regardless the methodology you're taking. So I wanted to really stress that point and help and remind you to keep that in mind. Qualitative research takes a constructivist approach. The individuals are going to construct their meaning, their reality through their own experiences, versus that positivist approach where you're looking for one empirical truth. So you're trying to find meaning from what you're experiencing and what is happening around you. We were interested in people and interpreting their experiences, how they construct their worlds, what meaning they attribute to their experiences, why they make the decisions they make based on those experiences. So that's what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to learn more about in qualitative research. We're looking about the phenomenon of the human experience and why we face the things we face and how we face those things. Then there's a lot of symbolic interactionism that takes place. So we're looking for patterns, we're looking to interpret. You may do a series of interviews, like for example, I just wrote a book called Show Me Sportscasters, and I want to find out what do these gentlemen that I interviewed, what do they believe, the play-by-play announcers from across the state, what do they believe are the key components and the key skills for play-by-play announcers. And so I've taken the transcriptions of those interviews and I'm looking for patterns and I'm looking for key phrases that they use over and over and over again to try and develop the phenomenon that is play-by-play. Data, like we said, is going to be collected through interviews. It's going to be collected through observing the behavior of individuals within a group and also through document analysis. And one thing I want to really stress is, we always define quantitative versus qualitative. Quantitative is the numbers, qualitative is the people. Yes, in essence, that is true. But we will use numbers in qualitative research. We just may use them in a different way. So we may look at census data and see if we can interpret trends and then get into the public and ask some why questions. We're going to use the numbers to build our questions that we're going to use for interviewing, if that makes sense. Your discipline and then the research questions and the hypotheses determine the questions that you asked, what you're going to observe, what kind of data you're going to analysis, all of those types of things. So a communication professional, for example, will look at a culture from a different perspective than a historian. So we're going to be looking for different things. Where they may be looking at the history of their evolution, we may be looking at their communication practices and how they develop meaning through those practices. That's where the difference comes in. The nice thing about qualitative research is, yes, you could do a research paper off of qualitative research. I've done a couple myself. Or it can become a book, like the book I wrote, my Show Me Sportscasters. An ethnography like Friday Night Lights, which was you may do in-depth interviews, those types of things. Jim Collins, he developed his book Good to Great based on interviewing professionals in business to see how they went from being a good organization to a great organization. So those are some things that I want you to remember when it comes to qualitative research. Okay, so there you have it. Some approaches to qualitative research, the underpinnings, the history, some of the philosophical backgrounds to it. But again, get into chapter 2, read through chapter 2, and learn a lot more about qualitative research. We'll be digging deep into each of the different methodologies throughout the semester. We'll take one methodology per day, or per week, excuse me, and we'll go through that one. But read that chapter 2, go to your discussion board and do post number 2. And as always, if you have questions, give me a call, shoot me an email, come by and see me. Have a great week.